Welcome to The Explainer. You know how you could be streaming a movie, downloading a huge file, and typing an email all at the same time? It feels seamless, right? Well, that's because there's this incredibly complex conversation happening inside your computer, a carefully choreographed dance between all its different parts. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that dance and figure out how all those parts actually talk to each other.
So let's start with the central puzzle. You've got this one single ridiculously fast brain, the CPU, and it's trying to manage a whole room full of other devices that all operate at totally different speeds. It's kind of like an orchestra conductor trying to lead a violinist who's playing at light speed while the tuba player is, taking a 5-minute nap between notes. How on earth do you make that work?
All right, to get our heads around this, we're going to follow the story of how engineers solved one problem after another. We'll kick things off with the CPU's biggest headache, then see how they figured out the magic of delegation, and we'll even take a quick trip back to the Wild West of early computing. It's a pretty wild story, so let's get into it.
Okay, so the first, and I mean the biggest, hurdle was speed. Just a massive mismatch. Think of your CPU like a Formula One race car, and pretty much everything else, your printer, your keyboard, is like a horse-drawn carriage. Now, how do you get those two to have a meaningful conversation without the race car just lapping the carriage a million times?
And this right here really puts that speed difference into perspective. A CPU can perform billions of operations in the same amount of time it takes a printer to spit out a single page. If the CPU had to actually wait around for the printer to finish its job, wow, it'd be like a world-class chef pausing everything just to watch a single grain of rice cook. It's an insane waste of power.
Yeah, this quote just nails it. If the CPU had to micromanage every little thing, every motor, every roller, it would be completely bogged down. It's like a CEO trying to personally make the coffee, answer the phones, and negotiate multi-million-dollar deals. It's not going to work. So what was the solution? Well, it's what any good manager does when they're overwhelmed. They delegate. And this simple idea, it changed absolutely everything.
And this is where the device controller comes into play. Think of it as a specialist, a department manager for each device. The CPU, our CEO, just gives a high-level command, like, hey, print this document. The printer's own controller then takes over and handles all the nitty-gritty details. Moving the printhead, feeding the paper, all that stuff.
This then versus now for the keyboard really shows you how much better this system is. Back in the day, the CPU had to constantly nag the keyboard. Did you press a key yet? How about now? Now? But now, the keyboard has its own little brain that just taps the CPU on the shoulder when a key is actually pressed. It's a game changer.
And this is the fundamental shift in thinking. The CPU isn't a micromanager anymore. It doesn't control the devices, it just communicates with them. It's way more of a partnership, and it's way, way more efficient.
Okay, so we've established that the CPU communicates with devices. But how? How does that conversation actually happen at the hardware level? What's the language they're all speaking? To figure that out, we got to dive a little deeper.
So one of the most common ways they talk is through this really clever trick called memory mapped I/O. Basically, every device gets its own little mailbox at a specific address in memory. So when the CPU wants to talk to, say, the graphics card, it just drops a message in the graphics card's mailbox, just like it would with any other piece of memory. It's simple, it's elegant, it works.
Now, the other option is called isolated I/O. This is like giving all the devices their own private highway, totally separate from the main memory highway. The good thing is you don't have device traffic clogging up the memory bus. The downside, you need special on-ramps and off-ramps, these special in and out instructions, which makes the whole system a bit more complex.
And this table really lays out the trade-offs. Memory-mapped I/O is way simpler, which is why you see it in processors like the ARM chips that power our phones. The bigger, more powerful chips in our laptops and desktops, the x86 ones, they actually use a combination of both. They get the best of both worlds.
So we figured out how the CPU sends a message. But that's only half the conversation, right? There's another huge piece of this puzzle, timing. After the CPU tells a device to do something, how does it know when the job is done? It can't just sit there and twiddle its thumbs. That would be a colossal waste of time.
Well, the first method they came up with is called polling. And honestly, it's like a kid in the back of a car on a road trip. The CPU just keeps asking the device over and over, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I mean, yeah, it works, but it's incredibly annoying and super inefficient. The CPU has to keep pausing what it's doing just to ask that question.
So, thankfully, there's a much, much better way. Interrupts. This is more like getting a notification on your phone. Instead of you constantly checking your email, your phone just pings you when a new one arrives. The device goes off, does its work, and only bothers or interrupts the CPU when it's actually finished and has something to report. So much more civilized.
So we've seen how modern computers have these really elegant ways of communicating. But what happens when you don't have those standards? Well, for that, let's take a trip back to the 1980s, a time I like to call the Wild West of computer communication. Now get this, the Apple II and the Commodore PET, two of the biggest computers of the era, used the exact same CPU, the same brain. But even though you could literally take the chip out of one and put it in the other, you could not run the same software. And the reason for that mess all comes down to communication.
Here's the problem. Even though they were using the same basic idea, memory-mapped I/O, every manufacturer wired things up differently. It's like they were all speaking different dialects of the same language. Each company just picked random memory addresses for the keyboard, the screen, you name it. A message sent from an Apple II was just complete gibberish to a Commodore PET.
And the result of this was absolute chaos. A command that would, say, draw a beautiful color on an Apple II might just make a weird bleeping sound on a Commodore. Or even worse, it could just crash the entire system by overwriting something critical. It was a complete and total mess. So it was that chaos, that Wild West period, that finally forced the industry to get its act together. They realized they needed standards. It was time to bring some order to the chaos.
For a long time, computers had this dedicated traffic cop chip called the North Bridge that directed all the information. But as CPUs got faster and faster, that poor traffic cop became a huge bottleneck. So engineers came up with a brilliant fix. They just got rid of the traffic cop and built all of that logic right into the CPU itself. This created a super fast, direct line of communication.
And what's so genius about the modern system is that it really is the best of both worlds. For the software, it still looks like that simple, easy-to-use memory-mapped system. But underneath all that, it's being translated into these standardized hardware superhighways like PCIe and USB. This ensures that everything can talk to everything else without causing a massive traffic jam or crashing the system.
So, after all that chaos, we've finally arrived at a place where pretty much any device can talk to any computer. It's all standardized, it's all elegant, but that leaves us with one final nagging question. If everything is so standardized now, why on earth do we still have to install a different driver for every single thing we plug into our computers? What's up with that?